Hi there, welcome back to the Bryan Kohberger Idaho 4 case. Something we've not looked at for over 3 months now. It was the last time I did a video coverage of it. Has much happened since? Well, we'll find out today because there's been some new news articles I'm going to be reading through, analysing if necessary. And I want to know your thoughts on the matter, the case itself, where things lie right now, and what's to look forward to, or not forward to in an exciting way, but more so what to expect next, right? For those that are currently hearing this live premiere, welcome. Feel free to share your thoughts and opinions, reactions in the live chat box. And for those watching on catch up, leave your comments down below in the comments section. If you do want to catch up on some additional videos, if you're interested in Kenny Veach or Dylan Rounds, my recent videos, some of them will be accessible top right corner of the screen, alongside the playlist of them, so you can catch up from there. But as with Idaho 4, true crime case, I think the last time we were looking at it, it was to do with, discovery evidence, some kind of evidence, some kind of witness. There was some kind of harassment going on and how things were treated. It wasn't done appropriately, or that's what it was being suggested by maybe Kohberger's defense team. I said, it's a while ago now because I've been focused on the other cases, but we'll just look at the articles today. There's about 2 of them. One is to do with the murder house, okay? You remember there was plans of demolition, taking it down, and there was a given date or so, maybe in November time, but obviously that's passed since. The house is still up, supposedly, or at least the house was still up to when this article was posted, what I'm reading today. And I think it was hinting at that if it is knocked down, it could benefit Kohberger in some way, right? Could that lead to him being released? I don't know. Could it lead to him having a reduced sentence? There's less evidence, maybe, story evidence, possibly. It might make more sense within the article itself, but anything that could put Kohberger at an advantage, if you're in the mindset and you know that Kohberger is the one guilty, you don't want that situation to come about where he has the upper hand, because if he can benefit from it and somehow get released or released earlier in the future, more people could be at harm's way, more people could be at risk down the line, you never know. As for the second article, it would probably be the first one what we read today. I think it was talking about 2024, some court dates set, or what could happen with the court case that's still ongoing from the looks of it. I don't know if it'll mention any key dates in particular, whether they truly happen or any are delayed, but as we've seen recently with the Dylan Rounds case and the preliminary hearing of James Brenner, although that's behind in terms of the court process there, in that case, there is movement forwards. Now is the movement forwards in this Kohberger case any more developments? Well, let's just head straight into the articles now and look at the true details. And as I said, you who are watching, if you pick up on any contradictions, misinformation, or you want to elaborate, add to it and share your thoughts, you can do so down below in the comments section. So the first article title reads, Idaho College murder suspect Bryan Kohberger could stand trial in summer 2024 as prosecutors request new dates. So why do they want new dates exactly? Summertime, take a while. Take in mind this article was posted December 24th, 2023. Okay, so it's quite recent. Details down below say, Idaho prosecutors have requested the trial of murder suspect Bryan Kohberger, charged with killing 4 college students, to begin next summer to avoid coinciding with the dates when local high school and college classes are in session. Right, so that's why they want a delay. Not that it's guaranteed to happen, but they want it scheduled for next summer, 2024. Now, does anyone know why it's necessary to avoid dates with high school, college classes being in session? Is it because it will bring negative attention? Will it cause a crowd? Will it cause any backlash? Does anyone know? Is it going to impact the students themselves negatively if they know the court thing's going on? Or does the court, the trial, the people involved themselves want it to be away when it's quieter so there's no interruptions, there's no trouble. If anyone knows, feel free to elaborate down below. It says, in a new court filing, the Latah County Prosecuting Attorney's Office asked the judge to schedule a jury trial to run for about 6 weeks, including the sentencing phase during the summer of 2024. Moving on. Says the document filed Thursday in Idaho District Court explicitly sought trial dates outside of the regular academic calendar and said that Moscow High School is directly adjacent to the courthouse premises, and already the significantly increased amount of media and other vehicles related to this case has strained available parking as well as safety and convenience for pedestrians, including students. Right, that's kind of unfortunate. The school being adjacent to the courthouse, close proximity, and if the trial's underway, people with the cameras outside crowding about, maybe an audience from the general public too. Parking, that can maybe impact students who might be in cars trying to park to get to the school or the university, right? It makes sense. But I think it's more aimed here that due to the convenience and the safety of students and general public, not so much that it would cause any damage to the courthouse, the trial there. There seems to be more one-sided taken into consideration, why it's best separating them on dates because they're in proximity to one another as for location. I understand that. Prosecutors also suggested in the filing that a summer trial would likely mean more availability of local accommodations, since it's not infrequent for area lodging to become unavailable due to university-related activities such as sporting events, graduation, etc. When universities are in session, they asked the judge to set a daily trial schedule running from 8:30 a.m. to around 3 p.m. to allow jurors time to manage their personal affairs during what is expected to be a relatively lengthy commitment. Okay, there's a photo of Kohberger, you see on the left. Listens during a hearing to overturn his grand jury indictment on October 26, 2023. Kohberger's trial was originally scheduled to start in October, but he waived his right to a speedy trial in August, which indefinitely delayed the proceedings. He is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count felony burglary in connection with the gruesome deadly stabbings of the 4 university students, Mogan, Goncalves, Knodel, and Chapin, as at the women's off-campus rental home in Moscow last November. Oh, okay. Women's off-campus rental home. I didn't know it was a female-only place. Well, if it was, why was a male there? I guess it's still allowed. Whatever. So what is it like when you get female-only gyms, but you don't get male gyms only? I don't know. It seems to be one-sided in certain areas. Anyway, unrelated. Let's continue reading. At the time of the killings, Kohberger was a graduate student at Washington State University, which is about 15 minutes from Moscow by car. 28-year-old was arrested last December at his family's home in Pennsylvania after finishing his first semester as a PhD candidate in criminology. He was later extradited to Idaho and is being held there while waiting trial. Take in mind, some of this will be repeated from the past, retelling the story. But since we've not looked at it for a while, there's no harm in looking back. If it gets too repetitive on the next article, I will skip points, okay, so it's more time efficient. It says here, Kohberger has denied any involvement in the murders, and a judge entered a not guilty plea on Kohberger's behalf earlier this year, because he was quite quiet throughout. Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson previously said he plans to seek the death penalty. Attorneys asked the judge in Thursday's filing to schedule a hearing to establish deadlines for both the prosecution and Kohberger's defense team to file any outstanding documents necessary to meet their proposed state date for his trial. That would mean attorneys on both sides complete discovery, witness list, jury instructions, and so on, and sort out any pre-trial motions, including a motion related to the death penalty, so the trial could proceed. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it that when they were talking about the death penalty in the past, it was bordering onto not so much lethal injection, but more a firing squad? Is that correct? And with certain family members, was it the Goncalves family that really wanted the death penalty and the firing squad? Does that still stand to this day? It says, The prosecution also requested that Kohberger's defence, but denied any additional chances to file an alibi notice and asked that the court not reopen this issue. 2 deadlines have already passed for the defence to do so, prosecutors said, and the defendant has already been afforded this opportunity. Public defenders representing Kohberger objected in a court filing in August to state the initial motion to compel him to provide an alibi for the night of the students' murders. In that document, his attorney said Kohberger took a drive by himself that night and has long had a habit of going for drives alone in the dark, often at night. I remember that point. I remember that one. Investigators believe the students were killed at some point between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. on the morning of November 13th, 2022, according to the probable cause affidavit for Kohberger's arrest. I actually have a map here. You see the red dot, Moscow. So 11:12, Kaylee and Maddie at Corner Club, 202 North Main Street. 11:13, Kaylee and Maddie at Grub Truck, 318 S Main Street. Yeah, the Grub Truck, that was the CCTV footage of the 2 females standing near to it, and then I think they walked off afterwards. 11:13, Kaylee and Maddie at Residence. 11:12, 2100, Ethan and Zana attend Sigma G party. 11:13, Ethan and Zana at Residence. Residence, King Road, Moscow, Idaho. Okay. Apologies if there's any unnecessary noise in the background. It's idiots doing work outside again at this time. I know it's ridiculous, but let's just carry on reading. It says, Mr. Kohberger is not claiming to be at a specific location at a specific time. At this time, there is not a specific witness to say precisely where Mr. Kohberger was at each moment of the hours between late night November 12, 2022 and early morning November 13th. The defence wrote in their August filing. And I think this is the last bit. In October, the judge in Kohberger's case rejected a motion filed by his defence team to toss out the grand jury indictment against him. The defence had argued for its dismissal because there was an error in jury instructions and said the burden of proof being presented to a jury as probable cause rather than beyond a reasonable doubt was not the standard in Idaho. The judge said probable cause was a standard of proof for a grand jury to indict in the rejection. Before we move on to the next article, which talks about the crime scene location, which is the murder house of where the students were taken out, where the key evidence was found, and the additional unknown DNA of 3 other males, including a glove found near one of the window's entrance points or exit points. You know, that cropped up in previous coverage what we did, and in some court documents. They talk about that location being demolished in time, and the time's ticking, the clock's ticking right now. The article, what we will read, will mention the strengths that will be in Kohberger's favour if it is knocked down. I've had to give my thoughts immediately. How would it benefit him? I mean, if it was really early on and not all the full-on evidence was collected and it was knocked down immediately, you could say missed out opportunities. So what would you be missing out on now when it's dragged on this long, when there's been enough time for people to gather the evidence from the location? Well, the article will explain clearly. I'm just giving you my rough thoughts from an outside perspective, someone who's not actively followed this case. Just take that into mind, hence why we are using these important news articles to try and stick to the story. But as I always said, if you pick out and see anything that doesn't make sense and it's frustrating, you want to share those thoughts, you can do down below. But there's not really much more to say here. We don't really need to look at comments from the previous video that I did on this case, because it was only like about 4 or 5. There wasn't too much missed there. There wasn't really any questions. So I think without further ado, let's just get straight into this other article and see the implications. This article was posted on the 24th of December, so once again, another recent one. The title reads, University of Idaho Murder House Demolition would benefit Bryan Kohberger as trial will rely on memories, expert warns. Right, so when they're talking about relying on memories, is that to do with what you can recount visually or using your memory to retell the stories on how things played out in which area, which room, instead of being able to go down there yourself or certain members of the court, the trials, be able to head down there themselves and have a look? It's just because I think there was another news article recent to this one saying just 1 week before the demolitions, was it a jury or some people went down there, key individuals tied with this case, had a look around the house and taken it all in. Now, maybe that coincides with this, highlighting that once it's gone, it's going to make it a bit harder as for certain evidence, as for retelling stuff, using one's memories and thoughts to what they remembered, what they previously saw. Not that it can be applied later because there might not be anything there, right? I mean, there was for and against arguments just in terms of should the house be knocked down or not. We can get into them maybe later, and you can let me know your thoughts, whether you think it should have been knocked down or shouldn't, okay? At least reading this article was created at the time of when the house was still up, okay? So let's just read it. It says, Kaylee Goncalves' family has been outspoken about keeping the home intact. And I think their point was, up until the case is over and done with and justice has been brought, okay, to the families that have been impacted, the victims. And then I think that's when they maybe wanted the home to be knocked down, but not anytime soon. As long as the case is active and the trial's ongoing, the house should remain as it is. And to be honest, Kaylee Goncalves' family have been outspoken in a range of different ways. As I said earlier, just as, for example, the death penalty on Kohberger, the firing squad, and that Goncalves, the family, were pushing that and wanted that outcome. And I think they were saying that the cost of it as well would be a high amount, but I guess the family's saying it would be worthwhile. Okay, well, let's just scroll on down to see the additional details, okay? It reads, the demolition of the three-storey house where 4 University of Idaho students were found butchered. I don't know if that word's been used before, butchered, quite an extreme term to use, but, you know, it was said that the demolition would benefit Kohberger. Defense at trial, legal expert has warned. Plans are in motion to tear down the house on King Road in Moscow, Idaho, less than 2 hours from the Washington state border, on December 28th at 7 a.m, the university announced. Right, so that day is closing on in shortly, December 28th. That's when the house is going to be teared down. Could there be anything that happens from now till then that could halt it, delay it possibly? Guess time will tell. Will anyone protest? Will the Goncalves family do anything about it? I wonder. You see that photo there of the house? Now, I've not checked since, but, you know, for quite some time, that image, that area on Google Earth Street Maps, it was blurred out for sensitive reasons, because I guess because of the case as well. But I do believe that at one point it wasn't blurred out, but the house next to it was. I don't know if that was a mistake made or not, but I saw it myself, and it wasn't exactly early on, because I think I looked at it either 2023 early or late 2022 is one of the date periods, right? And can you go back in time? Well, I don't think it works like that on Street View. But do you know what? I'll just mention it right now. They're saying that if the house is torn down, you have to rely on memories. Maybe it makes it harder on the case when retelling the story or something. But, you know, you had to use, like, memories to track everything of what happened and where and what room is what. Well, didn't they have that software or something, which some of the true crime channels were using themselves, where it was like a 3D room tour of the actual building itself? You could walk on in with a camera and zoom and pan around and go in each room. There's that software out there, so I'm sure to be able to get a hold of that, maybe some more in-depth stuff. There's even like blueprints and maps, which some of the true crime YouTube channels were covering and analysing. So there is external material out there. So if the house is demolished, you've still got that additional material, which would probably be useful. There's Kohberger again. There's the victims there. Scroll out. It says, in quotes, "It is the grim reminder of the heinous act that took place there," President Scott Green said. "Whilst we appreciate the emotional connection some family members of the victims may have to this house, it's time for its removal and to allow the collective healing of our community to continue. The fast approaching date, which has raised concerns, will see the property destroyed before the start of Kohberger's trial, which has not yet been set. The move will likely benefit Kohberger's defence, forcing the state to rely on people's memories and recollections during the trial," said Mark James, a Florida-based defence lawyer from that law who has no affiliation with the case. Right, is that it there? Oh, okay. Oh, let's just see this. Beneficial to the defence. So, Jeme, is it Jeme or Jame? Bloody hell, these names. Also believes that the prosecution's case may be in jeopardy if a ruling is made against using the FBI's 3D rendering of the Moscow home. So this is what I was talking about just before. I think that might have been similar or the equivalent of what YouTubers were doing themselves. I'm sure someone said that it was illegal or it's a bit sensitive to be using that, but certain people did online. Bit dodgy there. But saying that, prosecution's case may be in jeopardy if a ruling is made against using the rendering. Why would there be a ruling made and opposing to not using it? Why can't you use it? What's wrong with using it? If it's such a problem that the 3D rendering can't be used in the case, well then keep the house up then. You have one or the other. You can't have both to be taken away because then it'll be difficult. It says it'll be beneficial to the defence because if there's discussion in keeping out a 3D rendering or a video and you're simply relying on people's memories and recollections and the reports that are put together by law enforcement, the GMA exclusively told the US Sun. There's nothing more important than the actual evidence tree. I would think the community is outraged over this, so I suspect that karma heads prevail upon the university, which did not want to leave it as a lasting memento. Since late October, federal agents have been constructing a visual and audio exhibits and a physical 3D model of the three-floor property to use during the trial. The exhibits will help the jury understand how the suspect might have manoeuvred through the house to get in and how the crime occurred. Kohberger's defence team was given access to the home on December 14th and 15th to take pictures and measurements of the area to prepare their case for trial. Right, so that's what I briefly touched upon earlier where they said about a week away from it being demolished. Defence team, Kohberger's defence team, going down there to take it all in, those photos. But, if those photos and stuff can be used still at the end of the day, it might counter, Kohberger supposedly being in a strong dominant position because they can still use other means of material for and against, in defence and also against him. State prosecutors were also allowed the same access before the planned demolition date. The Goncalves family released the following statement through their attorney, Shannon Gray. "Let us ask this, isn't it better to have the King Road house and not need it than need the house and not have it?" Yeah, I guess. That has been our question to the prosecution and the University of Idaho for the entire time the demolition of the King Road has been an issue. But why is it even up for discussion? This is one of the most horrific crimes in the history of Idaho, and the University of Idaho wants to destroy one of the most critical pieces of evidence in the case. And it's also important to make note that there is now a demolition date before there is even a trial date set. This alone speaks volumes. Fair point? It's obvious from the two recent visits to the house by both the prosecution and the defence that there is still evidentiary value in having the King Road house still standing, Gray added. There may be additional discovery by either party that prompts one side or the other to go back to the scene of the crime. There's always been a dialogue about the 3D imaging or the building model to replicate the home, etc. First and foremost, What a waste of state money and resources. And secondly, nothing replaces the real thing, I guess, because of the true scale of it. Yeah, that would be the thing. Jurors are notoriously unpredictable and they tend to make decisions on a variety of facts and circumstances. It would be foolish of us to try and foresee what they will want or need to make a just verdict in this case. The family has stressed tirelessly to the prosecution and the University of Idaho the importance, evidentiary and emotionally, that the King Road house carries, but nobody seems to care enough. It's like screaming into a void. Nobody is listening and everyone tells you how sorry they are for the decision, but the family's opinions isn't a priority. Victims' family have a voice and should be heard and listened to. The US Sun has reached out to Goncalves family for comment. What's this down here? Pen and trial. Right, so that basically gives the same old story, basically, of what's previously happened. 6 weeks, yeah. You know, you can pause this if you want, but we have read through this before. I'm just scrolling down to see if there's anything additional. Right. It says a convicted Kohberger could face the death penalty, such as a firing squad, I guess, which Goncalves family want. Right, so I'll just add on my final points there, because it is kind of, you could call it shocking in a sense. So let me know your thoughts down below, first of all, whether the news, what you heard there, is shocking or not. As said, the first article was more about possibilities of pushing that court trial, the date of it, so it goes underway at a time of where it's not going to clash with students, people at the school, just because of the distance to one another being close. That could cause further problems on top of everything else, and you want to try and limit as much damage as possible. Enough's happened already. There might have been enough mess and enough delays. Do you want any more past that point? Probably not. Summertime 2024, not guaranteed, no specific dates given, trial not even underway yet. So really there's still that uncertainty. So you can understand from the Goncalves family that the decisions made by like the university, the ones in control there, and maybe even does the court, any there in positions support the idea of the building being torn down? It didn't quite say there, but there might be others in the background that agree that it should be taken down. I'll give you my opinions in a second, but there's a fair point by the Goncalves family to say that in general, university, and maybe some others, are prioritising stripping away key important evidence, the crime scene itself, taking it away. It's almost like, what do you call it? It vanishing in front of you, taking important material and possible information away. What do they call it? Evidentiary evidence or something, material. Take that away before the trial comes around. So when the trial does finally come around, what do you have now? Less than what you had before the trial. And that doesn't seem quite right. Let me just unzip this, it's getting a bit warm. See, this is to think, at the start of a case, before it's even gone to trial court, you might have limited evidence, limited material. And as time goes on, you might collect more and build more of a case. And when it's going to trial, you've built a case strong enough with the evidence in favour, in support, or against somebody to then lead to a result and some form of, victory, some form of justice, right? But the way it's going here with the Idaho 4 case, although maybe a rich depth of evidence, I mean, you could argue against that, but a range of evidence was collected early on, and there was a police presence too, probably more effective than other cases out there like Dylan Rounds. Okay, short term, maybe arguably a little bit more successful. Maybe not everyone will agree with that, but if you're comparing it to other cases like what I've experienced, I'd say it's a bit more successful there. But what about the long-term aspect of it? Because with the Dylan Rounds case, still can be treated as true crime. Missing person related, but true crime outcome. But long term, more evidence has been collected along the way, right? Such as the new DNA evidence with the dogs, what they found out there, searches ongoing, or up to a certain point at least before winter time, right? And maybe, I don't know if it would be during or just before of this time, searching for Dylan again and maybe finding more stuff. But With the Dylan Rouse case, evidence has been collected along the way, and it might have been dragged out, right, for numerous reasons, police, resources, and other BS going on, etc. But the evidence that has been collected, even if it's at a later date, has all come into play and has been, eventually valued, appreciated, acknowledged, put into play, and strengthened the case in some way or another. It's been acknowledged. But you look at the Idaho 4 case right now and the possibilities of what's coming ahead, 28th of December, demolition, the crime scene taken away, the crime scene disappearing, unable to go back to the scene of the crime and to replay it through, to look at the access, entry, exit points, to establish the patterns and behavior by the individual / and or other individuals, like how it talks about the 3 unknown males in the past. Where did they come from and exactly what time? Were they possibly in the same room or area as to when Kohberger supposedly was there, or at different times? Did they go through the same way or not, or was it different access points? That bit there, and then maybe some additional stories of, how did it go down within, and the end point of once the people were taken out. Swiftly, fast, slow, messy, silent, different possibilities. You play it through your mind, but sometimes when you're recalling events and you're trying to work it out, it does tend to be more successful and practical if you're at the scene of the crime, or even if it wasn't a full-on true crime case and it was more of a car crash and you got to replay it through. You actually got to go back to the scene of where the crash took place of the cars and maybe measure the distance and work it out, tape the area off. And, maybe to an extent that was already done in the Idaho 4 case early on, but to go back to it is always necessary to maintain that, balance and focus, and to, remind oneself, remind everyone else of what exactly happened, to be specific and accurate too. Because, if you've got limited material, limited evidence, you might have to rely on other means, and it might not be as practical. In this case, the wording it as memorizing what's happened. That's why people have already gone down there since, to make the most of it, to get the photos, to get video footage. Whether the 3D model is used or not, it's still not enough, okay? And it is ruled out, even more limited to what you have. Take the photos, do what you can in between before the place is knocked down. So then if you are telling the story, retelling the account, the memories, exactly how things played out, you can always look back at the photo and say, here's exhibit A, exhibit B, this is the room of when that happened, this is the room where the possible entry point could have taken place. Something like that. I just think that a crime scene tends to hold most, if not all, the evidence, and whether it's found immediately, short-term or long-term, or if it's just used as, a key point to reflect back on at an important time, okay? To understand the depth of it, and as well the scale, because you compare being at the murder house crime scene in real life, you compare that then to some 3D animated model, it's not going to be appreciated or acknowledged the same way. The actual depth of it, the size, the scale, because it just doesn't match up. Maybe it can alter people's perceptions or how you actually take it in at the time. The only example I can give, and it's not the best, you compare flying a plane and then compare that to being in a high-end professional flight simulator. It's simulating the real thing, but it will never be the actual real thing. So the moment you go from the flight simulator to the real thing in an actual plane cockpit, you're going to feel a difference. And your brain's going to engage more with what you're doing and maybe more focused too, more of a serious matter, right? It's kind of like it's a bit different, but it's still how the brain can react and engage with stuff. You can see material online. It could be gory. It could be bad. It's not pleasant, and it might impact you. It might affect you. You might think, damn, this is not good. This is brutal. This is rough. But then just imagine if you witnessed it in real life. That can cause equally the same damage, if not more, because it's in person and it feels and it is more real because you're there to witness it, okay? So the scale aspect, the reality aspect, actually being there, right? And for the people that might have been there at the time or nearby to give their side of the story, like have like witnesses, if they need to rely on certain prompts or pointers such as the house itself, and if that's taken away and other potential evidence too, it might make it harder on people to retell stuff and others. And if people can't retell the events as clearly or as accurately, that strength is lacking, certain evidence is lacking on Kohberger's side. It's like, well, do you have enough to actually prove that I did it? Do you actually have enough? Is it accurate to what was suggested back then or not? You know, does the story add up or not? And, you know, if it's not good enough, maybe Kohberger might benefit. To what extent, though, it didn't quite mention in the article, what extent would Kohberger benefit if the house is demolished and the 3D model animation is not allowed in court either during the trial? What would that mean for Kohberger? You know, what are the chances that he'll be released, you know, immediately? Is that even possible? And if not that, does it lead to a reduced sentence if things are taken off the table? Or will it just be as simple as just simply the death penalty is taken off, but everything else follows through and there is still a form of justice? If anyone does know the ins and outs, you know, you're welcome to leave a comment down below. That'd be appreciated. I'm just trying to break it down as much as I can, but also understand and take into mind that with other cases that I've looked at, long-term evidence has been acknowledged and collected along the way and not lost. Because with the Dylan Rounds case, you compare that to the Idaho 4 case, short-term wise, there is potential key evidence and, you know, key opportunities that were missed out on early on, such as maybe Brenner's phone pings, possibly. It wasn't really elaborated that, but more specifically, probably Dylan's truck data of where he actually went. Some of the scents and DNA of key spots which were ignored and dragged out over time. So if they did try to find anything there at a later point, there wouldn't be anything actually there because they left it too long, right? And there's some additional stuff as well, which I've done videos on, but short-term wise, missed opportunities, very important ones which could have led to finding Dylan as soon as possible. But ever since then, things have in a way improved long-term, with the rest of the evidence being collected and found along the way and put to good use or so for the right reasons. In terms of longevity of this case, which has just dragged on equally as long as the Dylan Rounds one, or kind of at least, with Idaho building and what's within it, the contents, the outside area, the environment, lost, taken, and then people having to rely on memories, which could be difficult for some. It might be hard, it might be more impactful. It could lead to mistakes being made, you never know. It's not that they're exactly to blame, it's just that things been taken from them to be able to rely on, maybe as a prompt or a crutch in retelling the accounts or events, right? I'm just trying to take it into mind from different perspectives, okay? So hopefully you understand that. I mean, let's just highlight the for and against arguments when it comes to the building itself, right? So there'll be some people that want it to remain there, maybe forever. There'll be some people that want it to be taken down as soon as possible. In my position, I would say it should remain up as far and as long as the case goes on for. And then once the trial is over, and let's say justice has been served in some way or another, and it's case closed, then yeah, maybe the building should be knocked down. But the trial hasn't even gone underway yet, so why should evidence already be taken away, right? Normally, evidence is collected, valued, and then put forwards in court in the trials ahead to use for or against. But if you're taking that away, certain elements, even before it's gone underway the trial, it seems like people are purposely trying to sabotage it. Now, could you say and suggest, only suggest, not as a fact, but a suggestion, an idea, is there a small possibility that the university are trying to defend Kohberger, trying to make it easier for him, whilst covering it up in a different motive of, we're taking the building down, demolishing it because we want to heal as a community, move forwards, but at the same time, secretly, we want to make the case more harder on people and easier on Kohberger so he stands a better chance of being released or a reduced sentence or something like that. Because, if Kohberger was working at the university and the university value Kohberger in some weird way or another, unknown to us, is one trying to cover for the other, indirectly, unintentionally, or on purpose? Does anyone think along that lines, or does that seem a bit too far-fetched? But I guess you could at least acknowledge that the university and the ones involved there, who are in control of these like housing areas and communities, because it's tied with the university, this like off-campus living accommodations. But the idea of demolishing it, what would they replace it with? New houses, so there can be more accommodation and maybe more money generated down the line if there is money to be made there? Or do they just leave it completely bare, open, some kind of possible memorial even in the future? I wonder. But I do think that the university, the ones in charge, are making it harder on the case, and that doesn't seem right. And taking evidence away before a trial has even gone underway doesn't make sense either. Even if it was during a trial, taking away evidence in an unnatural way seems forced and is once again unnecessary. So it is a weird situation. I've not really come across something like this before, I'll be honest with you. But, if you have, share your stories or experiences down below, whether it be what you've experienced or what you've seen elsewhere, if there's been other cases you've looked at, okay? But, I can imagine in general, certain audiences or general public could argue and say the building should remain up simply because it's a crime scene and it's not over yet the case. So it needs to remain from start to finish, right? And maybe onwards past that point, because it serves as a reminder of what happened. And we need it as a reminder to prevent things from happening like this in the future. If you forget and move on too quick, history can repeat itself. And it could happen again for whatever reason, somehow. So by just completely, removing it just like that, it's not a good idea. It needs to be there as a reminder, to remind people of what happened. But then you get the other side, general public, that will say, we don't want it to be a reminder because it makes people sad, it makes the family sad, it's just not right, it's not fair. Now take in mind, the Goncalves family wanted and want the building to remain up to a point in time. So they're not too phased by it. What impacts them more, victims' family, is that it's being taken from them, lasting pieces of evidence, which is important and crucial for the case, which could lead to justice. If they want justice, they want the evidence, as much evidence as possible. If that's reduced or taken away, then that can impact the possible outcome and then impact the families too. So it's causing more damage, more emotional damage by taking the building down immediately, okay? But, general public out there who might think differently, a different side, could be like, this is a sad reminder. We don't want to be stuck in circles going around like this. Let's get rid, let's move on, let's all be positive and move forward. That can be considered a little bit delusional because it can be impactful to the case. And if things don't go to plan, and I know someone might be released, you could get another case like this down the line. It's like, well, all because of the house, did it all come down to that? Maybe that'd be a bit too far to say right now, but it could be one of the building blocks which didn't help in the potential future outcome, right? But the other point, I guess, what people were mentioning, and it might tie in with the university aspect and those there in that community, that you keep the house up, it could form as a shrine for people that are showing support, emotion. I'm sorry about this, I'm sorry about that, let's bring lots of flowers. It can lead to a lot of, it can lead to like a tourist destination spot where people from maybe around the US and further afar, depends how, focused and interested people are tied in with this case, could fly on over, come on over, pass by, drop flowers off. But then could it impact the people, in the neighborhood that might be temporarily living there or what, tied with the university, or this unwanted strangers coming on in? Could that pose as a potential threat, safety concern for the people on that off-campus site or on-campus site, however you word it? Could it lead to further issues there somehow? And if people are a bit like fanatics, could that lead to more trouble Some people, when it comes to bad events, might camp outside and stick around vigils and all that, and maybe it can get a bit too much. And that itself can be, besides the house itself, like people's presence constantly coming on over like a pilgrimage. It can be like a constant reminder. It's not exactly moving forwards, is it? And you will always get those other groups of people, maybe a minority, but there'll still be out there, the ones that might be in support of Kohberger or into true crime, but kind of like for darker reasons. And they might get the spirit boxes out, they might get the crystals, they might hang outside of the house, they might even try breaking in and, you know, communicating with the dead, trying like do some kind of paranormal investigation. And that could be considered as bad, poor taste and disrespectful, and that can impact people in the community, and it could also impact the families that they hear about it too. So you can have the negatives there, and you know, if some people aren't willing to move on and want to stick around, they could turn a bit nasty too, which could lead to further confrontation and conflict and trouble, right? And I think, on a side note, even if you took the house down and then you had like some kind of memorial, you know, would that attract unwanted attention? Yes, no? Let me know your thoughts down below, okay? I don't know if there's enough time to do it in a poll right now, unless I do it later or at a different point in time. I mean, you would have had it in other areas, different situations, but still that have resulted in a tragedy, like when you get the school shootings and you maybe near to the school or a bit further afar, you might have an area, a memorial to acknowledge the people that did pass away in the past from a certain event, such as a shooting or so. You know, different method, different outcome to the death, but still treated as a crime, right? And more than one person impacted, involved, more than one victim, you know, caught up in it. And that can bring attention to, you get the good people that come on over, not all the time, but here and there with flowers to acknowledge the ones that have passed away. But then sometimes you get the bad people that come on over that might damage a memorial, harm it, destroy it, which can cause its own problems. Now, let me just give you my thoughts and opinions on the matter, okay? And it might tie in line with the odd key person in this case, okay? So, the way I say it, you got a crime scene, you do as much as you can to preserve it, because when you don't, you can miss out on a lot. The Dylan Rounds case kind of demonstrated that. Potential true crime scene, Grangeshed property, not treated seriously enough, not taped off. The likes of Brenner, who had access to it and was allowed to go in there whilst police were there, move a vehicle, which Dylan supposedly last drove before his death, parking it in there, and as well taking trash out, Brenner did, and dumping that elsewhere. Actions like that, whether Brenner was actually taking stuff out of the shed or not on that day, it was documented that he did take some stuff out because it was bagged and people were there to witness and see it themselves, right? Whether it be because the person was trying to take stuff away, evidence, and then hide it afterwards, or if it was just normal, natural rubbish. You know, in a normal mindset, you wouldn't be thinking, right, let's do this activity on this day during a case, a crime scene. You know, you'd be maybe more sensible and thinking, right, I'm not going to touch anything because likely I'm not allowed to. I don't want to get in any trouble. I don't want to get involved or seen as suspicious. I don't want to contaminate or harm anything because I could get punished for it, and it might harm the case of the missing person out there or the victim involved of a case. I need to keep my distance and do what they say. No, Brenner didn't do that. He did his own thing, which was very odd in its own right. But if he had the opportunity, or if he felt like he could and he felt invincible to do what he wanted and when he wanted, and it could benefit him, or at the time he thought it would benefit him, yeah. That almost like a form of desecration, a form of disrespect to the crime scene, which can lead to opportunities and evidence being missed, lost with time. That's not good. It can harm the case. It can. I think with the Dylan Rounds one, maybe it's not been harmed too much because other evidence was collected down the line to make up for the previous mistakes. But with the Idaho one, maybe it seems like things are going backwards now, possibly. Does anyone agree? Does anyone agree that the case that's been built up with time and evidence collected along the way, is it going backwards now because things are at risk of being lost, such as the demolition of the house, 28th of December? I want to know your thoughts there. All I would say is that the building or the crime scene, as I said, needs to be preserved and kept intact and remain there as long as possible for as long as the trial goes on for, so it can always be used as a reference point. If there is a counterpoint made or it needs reinforcing of a bit of evidence, you can always refer back to the actual scene of the crime in person if you wish to, or through the usage of other media, photos, videos, and maybe even a 3D model. Now, as I said, unfortunately, the article didn't explain as to why the 3D model could be ruled out of being used. I mean, what would be the problem in using it? If that's all you've got and you're making the best of it, why they're ruling that out as well? You're going to take one thing away, then you're going to take this away. You know, what else are you going to take away next? It seems as if you want less evidence on this case because you want Kohberger to look more innocent. Okay? As I said, there'll be different sides of people out there that some will genuinely think Kohberger's still innocent and others have changed with time, and then the remainders who've not changed since. I thought Kohberger was the one, right? But I'd say that maybe the house should be knocked down, but not yet, more so in the future. Get the best of both. That being like a win-win situation in a small scale way. You still got the crime scene, you still got evidence, you still got the storytelling, and you still got a reference point for reinforcing key points and maybe looking back at, which I don't know if it's guaranteed, but new things could be found along the way somehow. You've always got something to lean back on in a way. And then if, or once, more so if justice is served, then get rid of the building to then eliminate any long-lasting issues of it becoming a tourist attraction or point. You take the main feature away in the future, it's less of a reason for people to go down there and visit, because what is there to look at? It'll be a bare patch, it might even be filled in with vegetation or a new building, right? You might still get some dodgy people coming on over to do some kind of paranormal investigation, talking with a spirit box in person, which would be a bit messy and awkward, but it would definitely reduce the amount of people that would go down to the area because there's no like true magnetizing drawing impact, right? And it can apply to really most cases out there. Scene of a crime, scene of a tragedy, scene of an event or mystery. It's because there is an object there, an item involved in it all. And that's the drawing point. That's what it's kind of like everyone orbits around it and they go to look. Just like how people could go to a pyramid to look at the mummy within. You take certain elements, the important part, away. What other factors are there that would draw them to that spot? Not as much. Less people likely to go down. You might still always get some, but it does reduce it, and it will reduce the problem too. So I think there's a time and place for everything, and as for the demolition, it's not the right time now. What will happen next though? What will happen before the 28th of December? Could it lead to a protest? Could it lead to things being changed or at least delayed? Maybe. I guess what doesn't help is that uncertainty of, you know, the true trial date being set. It's been hinted at maybe summertime of 2024, but it doesn't give an exact date, month, so that's still uncertain there. Yeah, it doesn't look too good at this point in time. I mean, you can leave your thoughts down below and let me know what you think. How detrimental would it be? What's the exact impact? How much damage would this cause if there is a demolition before trial? Let me know down below. I think we'll leave it there for now. I just wanted to do a little update video on this, case, because it's quite a popular, important one, and people that are on my channel may not always be following it. So if we can present this to you, it can help. And for those that are watching my channel and do participate in this case too, you can share your thoughts and interact if you want to, because it's appreciated. Okay. So in general, hopefully you found it interesting. Feel free to catch up on previous videos if you haven't caught up on them quite yet. And yeah, we'll see you next time. For now, goodbye and good night.